Hi, and welcome to the Desert Lady Diaries podcast, a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. I'm your host, Dee Davis, and this is episode number 16. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a returning listener, thank you so much for coming back. You can find us on the web at desertladydiaries.com, or you can email us at desertladydiaries@gmail.com. And if you want even more, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. I've got a special shout out this week to Columbine Gorton, who heard about the podcast at the Work It Women's Podcast Festival in downtown LA in early October. She wrote to me, said she was listening to the podcast, and then that she was coming out, so we did get to meet each other at the pancake breakfast at the Copper Mountain Mesa Community Center earlier in November. So Columbine, if you're listening, thanks so much for listening, and thanks for meeting. It was great to see you. Also, we have a number of busy desert ladies, and at the end of the episode, I'm going to give some information about where you can find them or participate in some of the things that they're doing. So hang out at the end of the episode and check that out. My guest this week has been living in the desert for more than 60 years, so as you can imagine, she had some really interesting stories to tell. Her name is Dee Davis, and her first vocation was as a journalist for the San Bernardino Sun-Telegram, which is what brought her to the desert initially. Her second act is as an attorney, and she's still practicing today in Yucca Valley. She talks about a number of things that have changed over the last 60 years, including the fact that the post office is no longer in a dry goods store. Hi, and welcome back to Desert Lady Diaries. Today, my guest is Dee Davis. She's a local attorney and first visited the high desert in 1955 as a reporter for the San Bernardino Sun-Telegram. She was sent to cover the first Interplanetary Space Craft Convention at Giant Rock. Her parents, Ruth and Harold Lawson, moved to Yucca Valley and built a home in Western Hills in the 50s, and Dee and her husband Tom came to the area in 52 so he could open a dentist office after the World's Fair had targeted Yucca Valley as the fastest-growing community in the western U.S. Dee is a veteran newspaper reporter and also published the Yucca Valley News Weekly. She moved back to San Diego in the 80s and then returned to the desert to open her law practice and has been practicing law ever since. Welcome to the podcast, Dee.
Thank you.
So your first encounter with the desert was not the interplanetary spacecraft, which we'll talk about in a minute, but it was just was that your first visit?
Yes, that was my first.
Okay. So did you just get that assigned as that was your job?
That's correct.
Okay.
And there was nothing here in those days.
I imagine.
Antone Martin had Desert Christ Park. He was working on the statues. The Catholic Church on Church Street in Yucca Valley. The Hardesties had a little post office in a merchandise store where they sold, dry goods.
Right.
And that was about it.
Wow. So you've seen some tremendous change being here since the 50s, not only in, our technology and the way we operate in life today, but here in this place of Yucca Valley.
That's correct.
Wow. So you decided then, because the World's Fair said it was the fastest growing city, to move up here.
And it grew too fast.
Did it?
It really did. It was more fun in the old days.
A lot less traffic lights on 62, I imagine.
And much more social. No drug problems, just very nice people who came here to retire.
Right. Well, and I see we still have some remnants of that with, I guess, all of the community centers that are in each of the various locations like Landers, Johnson Valley, out in Copper Mountain Mesa.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Did any of those people, did they all kind of stick with their own community centers, or did they, maybe get together once or twice a year as a whole?
Well, the people who were community leaders would get together for picnics in the monument, it was called in those days.
Okay.
Parties, there were parties at house parties. And very nice, interesting people.
When would you say at what time did things really start to change and really start to, I don't know if modernize is the right word, but get busier with more people and more things on the highway, more businesses?
I would say in the early 60s, I saw a change. And you recognized the change because you used to go to a grocery store and you knew everyone. And around that time, they were strangers.
Right, exactly. You're starting to see people that you didn't know.
Exactly.
Talk to me about coming to the first Interplanetary Space Craft Convention at Giant Rock.
Oh, it was hard to find,
no doubt.
Number one.
Mm-hmm.
In 29 Palms, thank God, there was a very nice motel, the Dolores Motel.
Oh, is it still there? Yeah, it's still there.
It was strange. The people were strange. A lady was up on a rock, huge monolith, and she was telling how she was walking through the desert and a flying saucer landed near her, and it was from Venus, I think she said, and the pilot raped her, and she got pregnant, had a son, and entered him in school in Joshua Tree. I mean, later. This is a little history on it.
Right.
I had a very chilling experience.
Did you go around and interview people and talk to people, or were you just kind of doing a general sense of the
just
event?
A general, taking pictures and doing that.
Right.
But one couple Van Tassell introduced me to said they were from Venus. I had my speed graphic, and a friend of mine who went with me had the sound. Mm-hmm. I got back to the newspaper. The people I interviewed were blank on my
gosh.
film. You could see through them. So I called Bert, and I said, I fouled up. He said, Dee, none of the sound came through from these people.
Oh my gosh.
So I don't know what the explanation is.
Right? Oh my goodness. So you actually got to meet George Van Tassell.
Oh, I got to know him.
Okay. And how was that experience? What was he like?
A very nice man.
Mm-hmm.
I can report he was in Tom's dental chair one night, and I sat with his wife out in the waiting room, and I said, that must be have you seen any flying saucers? And she said, I don't believe in that stuff.
Oh my goodness. So you wonder how they stayed together all that time when he was obviously very focused on that sort of thing. And I was looking this morning before I came, I saw they had a diner out there.
They had,
too.
But he had a very good background. He was a test pilot, and I think he had some engineering.
Yeah.
So, they had a diner out there. Mm-hmm. We won't go into the history of Giant Rock today.
No, not at all. But what's amazing is you've seen it now both ways, I imagine.
Yes.
As a whole, and for those people who are listening that aren't familiar with Giant Rock, it is a giant rock out in the desert. But what year was it that a piece fell off? It's fairly recent, right?
Well, it's all underground. There was a room underneath the rock that was an alleged spy lived under there.
Oh.
During the war, World War II, and it's just a long.
Right, but when the rock, that piece in the front fell off or broke off, was that part of the lander's earthquake, or was that something else that caused that?
I don't know if it calved during the earthquake or if I just don't go out there.
Right. Oh, okay. I've only been out there once, but I can say that walking up to it, obviously, it's amazing because it is so big. And then I walked around the back of it, and it's unfortunate that there is graffiti out there on it now and things like that. A lot of the off-road people ride out there, and I'm not trying to connect either one or the other. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
But as I came around, there was a concrete pad, like a foundation may have been laid, and maybe there was a structure there. But I can say as soon as I stepped on that pad, I could just feel my body come alive. There was like an energy that was coming from it, which was super cool. So yeah, it's a really cool place. And have you ever been in the Integratron for the sound baths that they do there now?
I haven't.
I highly encourage it. It's really, really cool. So when you moved out here, your parents were already living here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So because I usually ask when people move out here, how they met their community.
It was through them. And it was very enjoyable because, all of a sudden instant friends.
Right, exactly. It wasn't like you were coming here cold and not knowing anybody, having to go out and find friends either through church or community groups or things like that.
On weekends, there was a lot of the people who were living here then owned airplanes, private airplanes. And weekends, you'd get a call. We're going up to Apple Valley for breakfast this morning. Come along.
Oh, my goodness.
And so, we flew to Mexico with friends. It was just a lot of fun.
Well, every once in a while I need to go into LA for something, and I'm thinking I should dig around and see if somebody either at the Yucca Valley Airport or 29 Palms has a little skimper. They would take me in for a minimal amount of money.
Well, don't forget, it can get bumpy up there.
Right. Well, I'm not too afraid of that. That's okay. So when you came up to Giant Rock, now your parents had already moved here. What was their focus in coming up here?
They were living in Bel Air. They were introduced to this area by my mother's sister, and Art Miller. And so she talked them into coming out. They liked it. So they sold their home and built a home here.
Wow, okay. And how did you feel? A lot of people come here and they say they feel a sense of spirituality, that this area is kind of a different feel from a lot of other places. Have you had that experience at all?
No.
Not at all? Okay.
No.
Interesting.
No, but a lot of interest. It's just fascinating.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I would guess that Contact in the Desert that takes place now at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center is kind of an outgrowth of the 20 years that George Van Tassell had the Interplanetary Space Craft Convention.
Yeah, I met the founder of...
Oh, wow.
I did put in a little stint. I was asked to work on the High Desert Star when it was like an advertiser, no news.
No news, oh my goodness.
So when I filled in for about a month, I put in news.
Right, yeah.
And I talked to him. He had been trained in India, and then he went up to the mountains in the Himalayas to Tibet and learned whatever they learn.
Right.
And he wrote a book and he autographed it and gave it to me.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yes, he came. He said his chauffeur stopped at that point when they were touring the desert. They were looking for a place to put mental physics.
Oh.
And he said it was late at night. They stopped at that point. And when the sun came up, he got out of the car and said, "This is it." He said, "I feel it."
That's amazing. Yeah.
He was a very, very smart man.
This is Ding Le Mei. Ding Le Mei? Or yeah, okay.
Dr. Dingle.
Right, okay, right. Yeah. Ironically, I am going to be doing a 10-day silent retreat.
Oh.
At the Joshua Tree Retreat Center. It's part of the Southern California Vipassana Center, which is in 29 Palms. Once a year, they do it at the Joshua Tree Retreat Center.
Great.
So I'm really looking forward to that at the end of the year. So it's going to be exciting. Tell me about your interest in journalism. Where did that come from? You're reporting, the news and things like that.
I walked into the newspaper in San Bernardino and I said, "I'm looking for a job." Next thing I know, I'm in editorial writing stories. I had no background, no journalism history, no trouble going anywhere. I became a journeyman reporter. It's one of those things.
Right. So then what was it after a while that made you decide to go to law school?
I was disenchanted with what was happening in newspapers. Opinions appearing in stories. It was dull. It exaggerated, a lot of times, lies. So I knew I could write, so I decided to go to law school and thoroughly enjoyed it. I would think I was the oldest one in my classes, but the very first day I was approached, "We're having a party, Dee. Saturday, come on over."
That's great.
It's just...
So in your class, were there a lot of women that were pursuing law at that time?
Not a lot. There were some, but it was mostly male.
Men, right.
I would say maybe 20% women the first year, and then the second year, probably 30.
I found myself kind of smiling a little bit when you were talking about being disenchanted with the news business and turning into exaggerations and lies. And then I wonder, what do you think of the news today?
Well, are you talking about CNN?
Well, I guess in the general sense of things.
Well, I think it stinks.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
I really do.
I think they have a real opportunity and a real, responsibility to not only just report facts, but I think they also have an educational responsibility, because so much of this, especially in international affairs or immigration, it's very deep and detailed. Yes. And I don't think the average person, even though they may be intelligent, can even really grasp what's happening and why. And I think it would be really great if they spent more time taking into account that in their reporting, as opposed to all these fluff pieces. In the sense of where we are right now in the world, is that really important? I mean, I guess a lot of people would argue that we don't need it all to be downers, but I think we need to be educated, and I think the more educated we were about those things, everything would look a lot different. How about you?
I think so, but look around you. The kids nowadays aren't really, in my opinion, being educated. They're constantly on their phones. They can't write. They can't spell. And they can hardly talk.
That's just, when you go into a store and have interaction with someone who's ringing something up. I had an experience a couple of months ago where something happened with the cash register, and she's like, "I don't really know how much change to give you." And let me help you with that. It was kind of embarrassing. She was probably about 16 or 17 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, that's really not great.
It is not.
Oh, my gosh.
And it's getting worse.
Yeah, it's not good. So
that's our future, God forbid. But
right.
But we do have very bright kids in the universities. Mm-hmm. So let's hope that overpowers the stupidity.
Right. Yeah, it's really a shame. We should be so much further along than we are, I feel like.
I agree.
Yeah. When you got here to the desert, and there wasn't really a whole lot to do. I mean, people come up here now and they go, "What do you do up here? What do we not do?" But in the 50s and 60s, what kind of things did you do, or what do you do in your spare time when you're not, working?
Well, I'm very grateful to Jesse and Sylvia Lyon. They took me under their wing, took me to the Rockhound meeting, and through the Rockhounds, I met people with the same interests. I've always loved geology.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, when I was in my sophomore year in high school, I worked at Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh for a summer. It started in archaeology, fell in love with the geology,
neat.
that I was exposed to.
Oh, cool.
So that was a no-pay job.
Of course, yeah. Intern, quote unquote.
Junior assistant archaeologist.
Right. If someone were to say, "You know what, Dee, I'm thinking about moving up to the high desert," what kind of recommendations or suggestions would you make to them about moving to the desert?
I would say, please don't. We're so crowded. If you're from LA, go up to San Francisco.
Oh, wow. And that's even more expensive than LA. And I think that's a lot of why some people are coming here, at least because it's still pretty affordable.
Yeah.
Housing and things like that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
the traffic is not near what it is down in LA.
No, but we'll see this all change. Now that we have sewers coming in, I know that some people won't be able to pay their taxes, and they'll be selling off. And we'll see a whole new generation coming in.
Right. How many of those turns do you think you've seen? You said initially in the 60s it really started, 60s,
the 70s, we were up and down, but the prices went way up around 76.
Okay.
But there are still a lot of poor people here.
There are, very much so, and not a lot of job opportunity per se. Mm-mm. I mean, I was just talking with someone yesterday about working out at the base, and there's always jobs available, but a lot of those jobs, are skilled technical jobs and things like that. Yeah, there's mostly retail here, which doesn't pay a whole lot.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I know I have friends who make jewelry and sell it. Mm-hmm. They're vendors at the different events.
Right, the farmer's market, or they do craft shows or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that doesn't pay the taxes
No,
either.
It doesn't, no. Do you read in your spare time? Have you seen any great movies or anything? What are you reading? What would you tell our listeners about?
I probably have maybe 75 to 100 great courses, and I watch those.
Oh, okay. Courses like on what?
On geology, history, ancient peoples, things that appeal to me.
Mm-hmm. So that keeps you busy.
Very fulfilling. Writing, sentence structures, all kinds of things.
Being a reporter, that makes sense.
and yeah, I love those awful newspapers you buy at the grocery store, the Inquirer.
Oh, the tabloids.
Yes, they're fun.
I call those vacation papers because usually if I'm going on vacation, I'll pick up a People magazine or Us magazine or something like that.
They're delightful, and that's a good hour of relaxation.
There you go.
I love yard work, but I haven't done any in a long time.
Right, yeah.
I'm too busy, right? I'm going to take more time off.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Yeah, at my age,
right.
I want to go out and play.
Sure, and you've earned that.
I think I have.
So usually about this time in the podcast, I have a little jar that has questions in it that are random, and you would pick one out. And they're 4 answers to questions that my 17-year-old niece was asking.
Okay.
And they're usually things that are about life in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't bring it with me. I went to put it in the bag, and I said, you know what? I'm actually, because of the breadth of your experience and maturity, I would rather ask you, given your life experience right now, what are a few things that you would tell young women today about living their life? From the place where you are right now.
Well, number one, I'm an old broad.
Well, I didn't want to ask or mention that, but...
Okay. I'm not ashamed of it. I'll be 90 in March on my birthday.
And you look fantastic, and the fact that you're still practicing law, and from what I hear in a really awesome way, is amazing.
I would tell them that you may change your idea of what you want to study, what you want to go into. You don't have to make one choice. You can make many choices as you go through life. And the thing is, don't be afraid. Do it. If you don't do it, you're going to be a failure. And by each mistake or each little experience, you're going to be like a rolling stone. You'll get some polish.
Right.
And it'll help with the next thing you want to do.
Always.
Yeah. Get off your butt and get out there.
And get it done.
And do it. And keep writing notes to yourself. Remind yourself, I'm going to be a brain surgeon. And if you concentrate, You may not end up as a brain surgeon, but you may end up as a CEO of some major firm. You just have to move and use your brain.
Thank you, Dee.
Well, I've enjoyed meeting you,
I've enjoyed meeting you, too. Thank you so much. This is great. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you.
It was so much fun to meet Dee Davis and talk with her about her experience here in the desert over the last 60 years. Pretty amazing lady. Speaking of amazing ladies, as promised, I have a few bits of information for you. Obviously, these are time sensitive, and the episode came out on November 14th, 2017. So if you're catching these at a later date, they probably won't apply. Episode number 1, we interviewed Sarah Witt, and on November 20th at, I think they start at 6:30 or 7 p.m. at the Copper Mountain Mesa Community Center, Sarah will be leading another high desert test kitchen. This time the ingredients are acorn, so go to sarahwitt.net, that's sarahwitt.net, and get all your instructions there. And again, that's November 20th. Also, earlier episode, Kimberly Sikora, photographer. She's going to be doing a second printing of her photography book, A Season of Solitude on the Road. The order deadline is November 20th, so if you're thinking about giving that maybe for a Christmas gift, you need to go to Kimberly's website, kimberlysikora.com, KIMBERLYSIKORA.com. And our musical ladies have a lot going on. Jessica Berryhill, drummer for Dur Trio. They'll be performing at First World on November 24th at 8 p.m. with a couple of other bands. Adra Jensen and Bellstar will be performing November 24th at the Hard Rock down in Palm Springs at 8 o'clock. Kathy Allen, artist and professor up at the Copper Mountain Community College. They're doing the $49 art show to support Copper Mountain College art student scholarships and the art program. That function is December 2nd from 4 to 6 p.m. at Copper Mountain College. If you want tickets to that event, go to cmccd.edu and get your tickets. Last but not least, Megan Hutch. Her new EP, Alchemy, is being released this Saturday night at a release party at First World from 7 to 8 p.m. For more details on that one, go to meganhutch.com. That's MEGANHUTCH.com. I told you these ladies were busy. Now, if you've been following this podcast regularly, you know we are approaching episode number 20, and that is really exciting. From something that started from nothing in the end of the summer, and to be at episode 20 is super cool. And I have a list a mile long of amazing women in this high desert region to interview. So what I'd like to do is get your feedback on what you think of the podcast so far, what you'd like to hear more of, what you'd like to hear less of, maybe some different questions if you want me to ask those. If you could put those up on the Facebook page, that would be awesome. If you want to do it more privately, send an email to desertladydiaries@gmail.com. I'm taking everything under consideration at the end of the year, and we'll see if we can shake things up a little bit. Next week, my guest is Gabriella Nagy, and if you want to find out how someone from Hungary ends up in the desert, you got to tune in. Thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you next week.